The hidden owner. Adjusting the brim of his worn baseball cap lower over his face, Ricardo Fuentes pushed through the glass door of Fuentes Diner. The bell above tinkled, a familiar chime, yet not a single staff member looked up. His disguise was perfect. Faded blue jeans, an old flannel shirt, and a 3-day stubble. For the past 15 years, he had owned this place, nurturing it from a near-bankrupt greasy spoon into a local favorite, now with 4 branches across the city. Lately, however, he rarely visited, consumed by expansion projects and meetings with investors. Something was bothering him. The online reviews were still stellar, but employee turnover had spiked, and the profits at this original branch were mysteriously dipping, even though business seemed steady. "Just one?" a waitress asked, without making eye contact. "I'll just take a seat at the counter," Ricardo replied, lowering his voice slightly to avoid recognition. He chose a stool at the far end, giving him a clear view of the entire diner. The lunch crowd was in full swing, waitstaff hurrying between tables, cooks shouting orders, the constant chime of the cash register. At first glance, everything looked normal, but Ricardo couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That's when he noticed Albert, the old dishwasher. He moved slowly, but with purpose, a stark contrast to the frantic pace of the younger staff. His thin frame and shock of white hair stood out. He looked to be in his mid-70s, but the sharp intelligence in his eyes, nestled under thick brows, showed he was still alert. "What can I get for you?" a young cashier asked. Her name tag read, "Emily." "Turkey club and a coffee," Ricardo said, sliding a $5 bill across the counter. As Emily keyed in the order, Ricardo gestured toward Albert. "He been working here long?" Emily rolled her eyes. "Feels like forever. Should have retired years ago, if you ask me." Ricardo watched Albert as he sipped his coffee. The old man worked without a break. He didn't even flinch when a busboy carelessly slammed down a tray of dirty dishes, splashing murky water all over his apron. Ricardo noticed that regular customers greeted Albert by name, and he always had a kind smile or a gentle word in return. Then, something unexpected happened. A young mother with 2 small children finished her meal and went to the counter to pay. As she opened her wallet, her expression fell. She mumbled something to Emily, who looked annoyed and called over John, another server according to his name tag. The two whispered, their irritation obvious, as the mother's face flushed with deeper embarrassment. Her children began to fidget, sensing the tension. Albert, who was cleaning a station, saw it immediately. He wiped his hands on a towel and walked over to the register. Ricardo couldn't hear the exchange, but he saw Albert discreetly slip some cash to Emily. The relief on the young mother's face was palpable. She thanked Albert profusely before leaving with her children. "That's the 3rd time this week," John complained to Emily, loud enough for Ricardo to hear. "The old fool is going to go broke covering for every deadbeat who walks in." Emily laughed. "As if he has any money to spare. He probably sleeps in that rust bucket car of his." Ricardo's grip tightened on his coffee mug. Maria, the general manager, walked by. Ricardo vaguely remembered hiring her a few years ago. She was completely oblivious to the small drama that had just unfolded. As the afternoon wore on, Ricardo continued to watch. Albert didn't leave when his shift ended. Instead, he started cleaning the corners others ignored. Twice more, Ricardo saw him secretly cover a customer's bill, a teenager whose card was declined, and an elderly man who seemed confused by the prices. "Why does he do that?" Ricardo asked the man sitting next to him at the counter, nodding towards Albert. "That's Albert. A good man, the man, a regular named Ron," replied. "His wife Martha died about 5 years ago. Cancer. It took everything they had. He's too proud to accept charity, so he keeps working, even with his arthritis." Ron shook his head. "It hurts to hear the way these young kids talk about him. They don't make men like Albert anymore." As the hours passed, Ricardo noticed Albert wincing when he thought no one was looking, rubbing his lower back as he bent over. But he never stopped. He never complained. When a waitress tripped and dropped a tray, he was the first one there with a mop and a gentle smile. "Don't you worry, honey," he said. "Accidents happen." John walked by, muttering just loud enough to be heard, "Yeah, especially when you've got old dead weight around who should be in a nursing home." The waitress flinched, but said nothing, as John sauntered off, laughing. By 5 p.m., the evening staff had arrived. Albert should have been home long ago, but he started cleaning the grease trap, a filthy job usually left for the night crew. "Albert, go home," Maria said as she did her rounds. "The night crew can get that." "I'll just finish up," Albert replied. "Jake's boy is sick again. It's no trouble." Maria didn't argue. Ricardo got the sense this was a regular occurrence. Sipping his third coffee, he noticed John and Emily whispering at the end of the counter, casting furtive glances at Albert. Their behavior was unsettling conspiratorial, with sly smirks and quick checks to see if anyone was listening. Suddenly, Emily made a show of frustration at the register and called John over. Together, they counted the cash drawer, their faces theatrically concerned. Then John announced loudly, "It's short again." "Third time this week," Maria chimed in, suddenly alert. "How much?" $42, Emily exclaimed, just loud enough for the nearby customers to hear. It was only short by $35 on Tuesday and Thursday. Ricardo remained silent, watching Albert, who straightened up slightly when he heard Emily's voice. The flicker of worry on the old man's face did not escape Ricardo. As a heavy feeling settled in his stomach, he realized what was slowly unfolding before him. This wasn't a simple accounting issue, it was a setup. Albert, the man who had quietly helped others all day, was now standing alone, completely unaware that he was being framed by two of his colleagues. Ricardo had come to his diner to get a sense of his business, but what he was discovering was far more important and far more disturbing. As he watched Albert under the harsh kitchen lights, he made a silent vow. He would find out the truth, no matter how ugly or messy it was. The next day, Ricardo returned in the mid-afternoon lull, still in his old clothes, his hat pulled low. He sat in a booth near the counter, close enough to overhear. He saw Albert carefully massaging his wrist when he thought no one was looking. Emily and John were there, talking in low voices by the register. When the diner was quiet, Ricardo ordered a coffee and a slice of pie, hiding behind a newspaper as he listened. There were only a few customers, some regulars, and a man working on a laptop. John, polishing the counter, spoke just loudly enough for Ricardo to hear. "I looked it up. Albert's been here 7 years, he said with a smirk. 7 years of washing dishes. Isn't that pathetic?" Emily rolled her eyes. "What's more pathetic is him always covering for losers, like that mom yesterday. Seriously? What's he trying to prove? Playing the hero on his tiny social security check. I bet the old-timer eats cat food to save a buck." John laughed. Ricardo's jaw clenched, his grip on his coffee mug tightening. He had built this diner to be a second home for customers and staff alike. To hear his own employees mocking a man like Albert made his blood boil. "I'm sure that's where he sleeps too. In that old rust bucket Buick," Emily added in a hushed tone. "Have you seen it? It probably just folds down the back seat. Or maybe he just has a cardboard box behind Walmart." John snickered. Emily didn't laugh this time. Instead, her voice turned serious. "Whatever. He's becoming a problem." Maria is starting to notice the register is off. The conversation was no longer just cruel gossip. They huddled closer, whispering. Ricardo strained to hear. "Here's the plan," John muttered, glancing around. "We already know Albert secretly puts money in the till when customers are short, but Maria doesn't know that. All she knows is that the profits are down." A slow, cruel smile spread across Emily's face as she understood. "So, if we help it come up a little more short." "Exactly," John nodded. "Then we make sure Maria catches him near the drawer. She'll think Albert's the one stealing." A cold dread washed over Ricardo. This wasn't just petty bullying. It was a calculated act of sabotage. He wanted to stand up and confront them, but he forced himself to stay hidden behind his paper. Why? He asked himself. Why would they do this to him? As if in answer, John said, "My cousin needs a job. Younger, faster than the old man. If Albert's gone, I can get him in. Then we split the referral bonus." "And I'm sick of watching him limp around," Emily whispered. "And don't even get me started on the customers." "Oh, Albert, you're so kind." "Oh, Albert, you're the sweetest." "It's nauseating." "Tomorrow's the day," John said with an air of finality. "Maria's doing inventory, so she'll be focused on the numbers. We'll make sure she finds a discrepancy, and we'll make sure Albert is the only one who looks guilty." They bumped fists and smiled. As a family came in and sat in a booth, Ricardo remained frozen in his seat. His coffee had long gone cold, but he didn't notice. Rage and disbelief churned inside him. This wasn't just bad behavior, it was a deliberate attack on a man who had done nothing but good. For the rest of the afternoon, Ricardo watched Albert with new eyes. Despite his obvious pain, Albert worked on without complaint. When a waitress stumbled and dropped a tray, Albert was the first to help, even calming the flustered server. When the coffee machine broke, Albert, who should have already gone home, tinkered with it until it worked. And once again, when a teenager couldn't pay, Ricardo saw Albert discreetly hand cash to Emily. Later, Ricardo overheard John talking to Albert by the wash station. "Why do you even do that?" John asked, his tone laced with mockery. Albert just shook his head. "Her mom lost her job last month. She's too proud to ask for help, but you can see the kids are hungry. Sometimes a hot meal is all someone needs to get through the day." After Albert walked away, John rolled his eyes and mimed a violin behind his back, clearly playing for Emily's amusement. When the day ended, Ricardo paid his bill and left, but he didn't go home. Instead, he waited in his car across the street from the diner. Nearly an hour after his shift was supposed to end, Albert emerged, moving wearily toward the parking lot. Ricardo started his car and followed at a safe distance. Albert's old Buick sputtered to life, billowing smoke as it slowly made its way out of the city. He drove past rows of houses and storefronts, heading toward the part of town where the industrial parks were. Instead of turning into a residential street, he turned onto a muddy dirt road behind a series of warehouses. Ricardo followed cautiously, his headlights off, navigating the bumpy path. The car stopped behind a grove of trees, almost invisible from the main road. Tucked away behind the commercial buildings was a small, dilapidated trailer, clearly decades old. Its metal siding was rusted, its windows cloudy with grime. Albert parked and slowly climbed the 3 rickety wooden steps that looked ready to collapse. He had to shoulder the door open. A single, flickering bulb illuminated a cramped, nearly bare living space. Ricardo sat silently in his car, a profound sense of shame washing over him. How had he not seen this? How could a man who gave so much of his heart to his business be living like this? The next morning, still in his disguise, Ricardo spoke to a few longtime customers. "That dishwasher, Albert," he said gently to an elderly couple. "What's his story?" The woman answered softly. "His wife, Martha, passed away about 5 years ago. Cancer. They sold almost everything for her treatments. He still sends money to the hospital when he can." "Does he have any family?" Ricardo asked. "A daughter," the husband replied. "Out in Seattle. She wants him to move in with her, but he won't go. Says he doesn't want to be a burden. Proud man, a good man." Driving home that evening, Ricardo's mind raced. He could no longer stand by while John and Emily destroyed Albert. The image of the old man limping up the steps to that broken-down trailer, contrasted with his own comfortable life, was a weight he couldn't bear. By sunrise, he had made several calls. His plan was in motion. He arrived at the diner before anyone else, parking discreetly as he watched the employees arrive. Albert's old car rattled into the lot, looking like it was on its last legs. Despite his certain exhaustion and pain, he got out and walked in steadily, a quiet determination about him. He paused only once to press a hand to his back before disappearing inside. Instead of going in immediately, Ricardo went to a nearby cafe where he met Ron, the regular who had first told him about Albert. Still in his disguise, he slid into the booth. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I can't get Albert's situation out of my head." Ron stirred his coffee slowly. Known him for almost 6 years now since Martha passed. They were high school sweethearts, married over 50 years. The cancer came on fast and just devoured everything they had. Ricardo leaned in. "Everything?" Ron nodded. They had savings, a nice little house over on Maple Street, but the treatment was experimental and insurance wouldn't touch it. Albert didn't hesitate. He sold the house, cashed out his retirement, even their car, poured every penny into trying to save her. "Did it help?" Ricardo asked. "It gave them another 8 months, Ron said, his voice thick with emotion. "Hardest months of his life," he said. "But he told me he wouldn't trade them for anything. And when she was gone, he refused to run from the debt, said it was still his responsibility." That's when he started at the diner. Ricardo filled in the blanks. A man with no restaurant experience, in his late 60s with arthritis, taking any job he could get. The trailer was all he could afford because he was still sending money to the hospital and helping his daughter. Ron nodded again. His daughter doesn't know how bad it is. He sends her pictures from the diner, tells her he's doing fine. She thinks he's a manager there. Each word was a punch to Ricardo's gut. Fuentes Diner had been his pride, a place where people were treated with dignity. He had let that vision slip away. "There's more," Ron added. "The land the trailer park is on was just sold. They've been given a 30-day notice to vacate." A chill went down Ricardo's spine. "Does Albert know?" "He hasn't mentioned it at work. Probably doesn't want the pity." "Where will he go?" Ricardo asked. Ron Sahil. "Rents are impossible around here. His daughter keeps calling, begging him to move to Seattle, but he refuses." "Why?" Ricardo asked, though he already suspected the answer. Ron's reply was simple. "Because of the diner. The people he helps, the customers who know him. It's his world now. He says it's the only place he still feels like he has a purpose." After thanking Ron, Ricardo returned to the diner. The morning rush was beginning. He sat quietly in his usual back booth and watched. Albert was a whirlwind of motion in the back, washing dishes, occasionally helping bus a table when needed. Though his joints were clearly aching, he never stopped, never complained. Meanwhile, Emily and John were subtly putting their plan into action. Ricardo saw John shortchange customers, pocketing the difference with a sleight of hand. Emily would pretend to void legitimate transactions, throwing the register's balance off. Every time they caught each other's eye, a smug smile passed between them as they glanced toward Albert. Ricardo's jaw tightened. They were building a perfect trap, and Albert was walking right into it. Around 11 a.m., a familiar face walked into the diner. A young mother with 3 small children. It was the same woman Albert had quietly helped a few days ago. As she approached the register to pay, Ricardo watched her carefully count out a small pile of change. His own muscles tensed when he realized she was short again. A deep blush crept up her neck. "I am so sorry," she whispered to Emily. "I thought I had enough. Can I just leave the tip to cover the difference?" Emily smiled sweetly, the kind of smile that barely concealed a sneer. "Oh, we don't need you to do that. I'm sure our dishwasher will be happy to cover you again." Then she raised her voice. "Albert, looks like your wallet is needed over here. Customers short." The diner went quiet. The young mother was mortified, her face burning red as other patrons turned to look. Her children stared up at her, confused, sensing the tension. From the kitchen, Albert emerged, looking unsurprised. He didn't rise to Emily's obvious attempt to humiliate him. Quietly, without any drama, he pulled a few folded bills from his pocket and handed them to the woman. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with shame. "I'll pay you back next week, when I get my paycheck." "Don't you worry about it, Amy," Albert replied gently. "It's summer break for the kids. It's tough to keep up. You're doing the best you can." With those simple words, the tension in the air dissolved. Albert asked about the kids, how their summer was going, and wished the mother luck on a recent job interview. When they left, the woman's dignity was intact, and her children were smiling. But near the counter, Ricardo heard John and Emily whispering. "Nice," John said. "Another $5 we can pin on Grandpa. Maria's gonna blow a gasket when she sees the numbers are off again." And that was the final straw. Ricardo stood up, walked out of the diner, and made a call on his cell phone. It was time to execute the final part of his plan. When he returned a few minutes later, Maria was coming out of her office, holding a calculator, a grim expression on her face. "The numbers don't add up," she announced to the room. "We're down almost $100 this week alone." John immediately stepped forward, eager to control the narrative. "I've noticed some strange things at the register, Maria. Maybe we should check the security footage." Maria sighed. "The cameras have been broken for months. Corporate won't approve the funds to replace them." Ricardo made a silent mental note to have a word with his regional manager about that. "Well," Emily chimed in, feigning concern, "I did see someone near the register earlier who wasn't supposed to be handling money." Her eyes darted toward the dish station. Maria's face hardened. "Albert? No, he wouldn't do something like that." "People get desperate," John added, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Especially when they're old, with no pension, no savings." From his booth, Ricardo watched Albert, busy at his station, oblivious to the slander being whispered against him. His hands were red and raw from the hot water and harsh soap, but he worked on quiet, methodical, dignified. In that moment, Ricardo's resolve hardened. Tomorrow would not just be a confrontation. It would be the beginning of a fundamental change, starting at the very heart of his business. a restoration of his values, and a guarantee that men like Albert would never again have to live in broken-down trailers or work in thankless anonymity. Ricardo left the diner filled with a new determination. The anger that had been simmering was now a fire in his chest. Yes, John and Emily would face justice, but more than that, he would face his own failings. He had let the soul of his dream corrode, and that was about to end. The next day, Ricardo arrived early, just as he had for the past 2 days. But today was not for observation. Today was for justice. After a long night of preparations and phone calls, every detail of his plan was in place. Wearing the same casual clothes and baseball cap, he sat in his usual booth, with a clear view of both the register and Albert's station. The shift began like any other. Albert arrived in his rattling car and entered quietly, moving a little slower than the day before, but with the same sense of purpose. Emily and John arrived together, whispering and smirking as if nothing was wrong. Maria was bustling back and forth from her office, the stress of the financial discrepancies etched on her face. At exactly 10:15 a.m., the bell on the door chimed. A woman in her early 30s entered, holding the hand of a little girl who looked to be about 5. Their clothes were simple and clean, but clearly showed signs of hardship: scuffed shoes, a patch on the little girl's jacket. This was Jessica Miller, a single mother Ricardo had contacted through a local community outreach program. This was no act. Her situation was real, but she had agreed to help in exchange for a generous contribution to her daughter's education fund. Jessica and her daughter Lily sat near the counter. Emily approached, her customer service mask firmly in place. "What can I get for you today?" she asked brightly. "Just a grilled cheese for my daughter," Jessica replied, "and a cup of soup for me." 20 minutes later, after they had eaten their quiet meal, Jessica went to the counter. She opened her worn wallet and froze. Her face fell, a look of what seemed to be genuine panic washing over her. "I'm so sorry," Jessica said to Emily, her voice quiet and strained. "I thought I had enough cash. My card's been acting up since yesterday. The bank said there's an issue they're still fixing. I'm short by $4. Emily's expression shifted from polite to glacial. "Well, we're not a charity," she said coldly. "Maybe next time. Make sure you have enough money before you order." Jessica's eyes filled with tears, and her little girl looked up at her, sensing the heavy atmosphere. "Could I maybe help in the kitchen? Do some cleaning for a little while?" Jessica asked softly. "I don't have anywhere else to be right now." "We have paid employees to wash our dishes," Emily replied, barely hiding the contempt in her voice. From the dish window, Albert had seen it all. He wiped his hands on a towel and, without hesitation, walked over. "That's all right. I've got it," he said gently, reaching for his wallet. Jessica, staying in character, shook her head. "No, please, you don't have to do that." Albert just smiled at her. "We all hit hard times. Just pay it forward when you can." As Albert handed over the money to cover Jessica's bill, Ricardo saw John watching from the second register, a triumphant smirk on his face. The plan was working exactly as they'd hoped. Jessica thanked Albert profusely before quietly leaving with her daughter. Not 5 minutes had passed before John approached Maria, who was reviewing receipts at the counter. "Hey, Maria," he said, loud enough to draw attention. "You might want to check register 1 again. Looks like it's short." Maria frowned. "It can't be. I just balanced it an hour ago." Emily chimed in, feigning concern. "Actually, I noticed something earlier. That woman couldn't pay her full bill, and right after that, I saw Albert near the drawer. I was serving another table, but it stuck out to me." Maria's eyes narrowed with worry. "You're saying it was Albert? He's not the type. When people are desperate, they do desperate things," John added with a show of empathy. "He's an old man. Maybe he doesn't have any savings. You should probably check the cameras." He looked at Maria with a mocking glint in his eye. "Oh, that's right. We don't have working cameras, do we?" "This is serious," Maria said, clearly rattled. "If someone is stealing, I have to know. Corporate is already asking questions about the missing profits." Emily stepped closer. "I have an idea. Why don't we do a spot drawer count, right now, before anyone has a chance to fix the numbers?" Maria nodded, her face grim, and began counting the drawer while Emily and John stood beside her like vultures. From his booth, Ricardo watched, seeing the look of victory on their faces as Maria found the discrepancy. $40 short, Maria said, stunned. "That's over 100 for the week. I have no choice. I have to act." Ricardo sat still as he watched Maria stand up, take a deep breath, and walk purposefully toward the kitchen, straight to the dish room where Albert was still working, unaware of the storm about to break over his head. Emily and John followed close behind, barely able to contain their glee. "Albert," Maria called out, her voice tight. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Albert looked up from the sink, clearly surprised by their serious expressions. "Of course, Maria. Is there a problem?" "I'm just going to be direct," Maria said, struggling with the words. "The register has come up short several times this week. It's short nearly $40 right now, and I have a report that you were seen near the drawer right before it happened." A look of shock, then confusion, and finally deep hurt crossed Albert's face. "You think I was stealing?" he asked quietly. "We both saw it," John interjected, his voice full of false regret. "You're always around when the money goes missing." "I was helping," Albert said, clearly bewildered. "Helping customers who couldn't pay. I was putting money in, not taking it out." Emily scoffed. "With what? Your dishwasher's salary? Come on." Albert's hands began to tremble slightly. Whether from age or emotion, it was hard to tell. "I wouldn't steal. I couldn't. Not from this place. Since my wife passed, this diner. It's been what's kept me going." Maria hesitated, confusion warring with duty in her eyes. "Albert, I've trusted you for years, but the drawer is repeatedly short, and now I have 2 employees saying they saw you in a place you shouldn't be." "2?" Albert looked between the 3 of them, incredulous. "John and Emily both told me," Maria confirmed. The words washed over Albert like a wave. The truth of the situation dawned in his eyes, the pain of betrayal. But he didn't shout, he didn't point fingers. He just stood there, quiet, dignified, even as the accusation hung heavy in the air. "I understand," he said softly. "I suppose you want me to resign." "I'm so sorry, Albert," Maria replied, her voice trembling with sadness. "Company policy on suspected theft is clear. I have to let you go, effective immediately." A heavy silence fell over the diner. Conversation stopped. Forks hovered in mid-air. The entire room, customers and staff alike, had turned to watch the scene unfolding in the dish room, unable to believe what they were hearing. Albert, accused of theft? It was unthinkable. John stepped forward, barely concealing his satisfaction. "I can escort him out back to get his things," he offered. "That won't be necessary," a calm voice said from the back of the room. Every head turned as Ricardo Fuentes stood up from his booth. But he was no longer hunched over or soft-spoken. He stood tall, took off his old baseball cap, and strode toward the group with the quiet, commanding presence of a true leader. Maria gasped. "Mr. Fuentes!" "I didn't know." Clearly, Ricardo cut her off, and in an instant, the attention of the entire room was on him. "It seems we have a situation that requires the owner's immediate attention." The tension in Fuentes Diner was electric. The kitchen clatter ceased. Every person was frozen, watching Ricardo approach the group by the dish room. "Mr. Fuentes," Maria stammered, "if I had known you were inspecting today." "This wasn't an inspection, Maria," Ricardo said, his voice level. "For 3 days, I've been sitting right here observing this operation, not as your boss, but as a customer. And what I've seen has been both inspiring and deeply disturbing." He scanned the room, his gaze finally landing on John and Emily, who both froze instantly. "Sir," John began, "we were just following procedure, with suspected theft." "Enough." The single word carried the force of a command. John fell silent. Albert was still standing by the sink, clutching a dish towel, his face a mask of confusion as he looked from Ricardo to Maria and back again. Ricardo turned to address the entire diner. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ricardo Fuentes. I started Fuentes Diner 15 years ago with a simple goal: to create a place where customers felt welcome and employees were treated with respect and dignity." He pulled a small device from his coat pocket. Maria said the security cameras were broken. They were, because I personally authorized the installation of new, hidden cameras with audio just 2 days ago. Maria's eyes widened. "But I never received a memo." "I know," Ricardo replied. "That's a communication failure I intend to fix, but right now, we have more important things to address." He walked to the side of the diner and plugged the device into a wall-mounted TV. It flickered to life. The room was utterly silent. Clear footage appeared on the screen. John at the register, shortchanging a customer and pocketing the difference. Emily voiding a real transaction after a customer had left. Then, the two of them, whispering at the counter, their voices captured clearly by the microphone. Once we pin this on Albert, Maria will have to fire him. Exactly. I get my cousin in here, and we split the referral bonus. Plus, we're rid of the depressing old man. A collective gasp went through the diner. A few regulars stood up in anger. Maria brought a hand to her mouth, her face a picture of horror. Ricardo continued, showing more footage. Now it was Albert on the screen, quietly slipping money from his own pocket to a young man who couldn't pay. Albert, cleaning long after his shift had ended. Albert, covering for another server's mistake, protecting his coworkers, quietly holding the diner together. Finally, the screen showed the scene from that morning. John and Emily deliberately messing with the cash drawer to create a shortfall. Ricardo turned back to the room, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. The story you were just told was a lie. The only theft happening in this diner was being committed by the two people shouting the loudest. John looked like he was about to faint. Mr. Fuentes, wait, this is all a big misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Ricardo's voice was sharp, framing an innocent man, skimming from customers, and character assassination. Is that what you call a misunderstanding? Emily started to cry, tears streaking her makeup. You didn't mean to get caught. Ricardo cut her off coldly. That's the truth. He turned to Maria. Did you know that Albert lives in a dilapidated trailer behind the industrial park because he's still sending money to the hospital every month to pay off his late wife's medical bills? That he sometimes skips meals so he can help other people who are short on cash? That he comes in early, leaves late, and works through debilitating arthritis just so he doesn't inconvenience anyone else? Maria shook her head, tears welling in her own eyes. I had no idea. Ricardo looked out at the entire room. Neither did I, because somewhere along the way, I forgot to look at the people who make this place run. That is my failure, and it ends today. He finally turned to Albert, who was still standing silently, bewildered, his hands trembling not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of emotion. Albert Johnson, Ricardo said, his voice firm but filled with warmth. You are the heart of this diner, and I will not let another day go by where that is not recognized. Suddenly, John made a break for the door, his face a mask of panic. But before he could get far, two burly regulars silently stood up and blocked his path. You're not going anywhere, Ricardo said coolly. I think the police will want to have a word with both of you about this footage. Emily started sobbing uncontrollably, while John's face contorted in rage. You can't do this. We have rights. You do, Ricardo replied, his voice dangerously calm. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you exercise it. Right on cue, the front door opened, and two uniformed police officers walked in the final piece of Ricardo's careful plan. He had called them that morning, shared the evidence, and arranged for them to be there at the right time. As John and Emily were handcuffed and led away, their guilt laid bare for all to see. A stunned silence descended on the diner, broken only by the shocked whispers of customers and the click of the closing door. Ricardo turned back to Albert, who had watched it all from the dish room, a pillar of composure in the middle of the storm, still dignified despite everything he had just endured. Albert, Ricardo said gently, I owe you an apology, not just for today, but for all the years I failed to see the burden you were carrying. I hope you'll let me make it right. Albert looked at him, his eyes calm, holding no malice, only humility. There's no need for an apology, Mr. Fuentes, he replied with a faint smile. Ricardo shook his head. Ignorance is not an excuse, but I promise you this. From now on, everyone is going to know what kind of man you are. And with that, the diner erupted. Customers were on their feet, applauding, some shouting bravo, while others wiped away tears. They were chanting Albert's name. Albert gave a small, shy nod in response, embarrassed but visibly grateful. This was his moment, and it was long overdue. Outside, the police car carrying John and Emily drove slowly away. The remaining staff watched in silence, a sense of not just relief but of understanding passing between them. It was a lesson none of them would ever forget about truth, character, and the quiet power of doing the right thing. The next day, Fuentes Diner opened as usual, but the energy inside was entirely different. Word had spread through town, and every seat was filled. Not just for the usual breakfast specials, but to be part of a moment, a celebration of the man they had once seen as a simple dishwasher, but now saw as a local hero, Albert Johnson. Ricardo arrived early, dressed in a simple polo shirt and jeans, having shed the corporate suit. Today, he wasn't a CEO, he was a colleague. Albert arrived at his usual time, looking overwhelmed as customers called him by name, shaking his hand, offering smiles and heartfelt thanks. Though shy, he accepted each gesture with his quiet grace. "Albert," Ricardo called, waving him over from the office. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" The diner fell quiet again. Everyone knew this was an important conversation. Inside the small office, Ricardo gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "I did a lot of thinking last night," he began. "About everything I've seen this week. About you, your story, your strength, and about how far my business has drifted from what it was supposed to stand for." Albert sat quietly, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "I've always been grateful for this job, sir," he said. "It came along when I didn't have much else." Ricardo nodded. "And in return, you gave it everything. You worked harder than asked, you filled in the gaps left by others, and you never asked for a thing." He pushed a folder across the desk. "This," Ricardo said, "isn't just a thank you, it's a correction. As of today, you're the new floor manager. It comes with a significant salary increase, full benefits, and a schedule that won't break your health. No more double shifts, no more heavy lifting." Albert opened the folder, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Me? I don't understand." "It's simple," Ricardo said. "You're the conscience of this diner. Leadership can be taught, but heart, integrity, and character, you already have those." Before Albert could respond, Ricardo slid a second folder across the desk. "There's one more thing," he said. "Last night, I contacted your daughter, Sarah." Albert's head shot up, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "You spoke to Sarah?" "She knows everything," Ricardo said gently. "About the trailer, the bills, your arthritis. She was heartbroken to learn you'd been suffering in silence for so long." Albert's eyes welled with tears, but he remained silent. "She told me something important. She said that love isn't a burden, it's a gift." Ricardo tapped the second folder. "Inside here is the deed to a small house, 3 blocks from here. It's not fancy, but it's clean, it's warm, and most importantly, it's yours. No rent, no mortgage. Consider it a 7-year overdue bonus." Albert's hands trembled as he opened the folder and saw his name on the deed. He looked up, speechless. "Mr. Fuentes, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not too much," Ricardo said firmly. "If anything, it's not enough." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And one more thing. I called the hospital last night. All of Martha's outstanding medical bills, every last cent, have been paid in full." And with that, Albert's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down his weathered face. Years of quiet struggle, silent sacrifice, and dignified endurance finally released in a wave of overwhelming gratitude. "Why?" His voice shook. "Why are you doing all of this for me?" Ricardo's own eyes were misty. "Because you reminded me of something I had long forgotten," he said softly. "That a business isn't about expansion plans or profit margins. It's about people. It's about doing right by the people who give you their all, every single day. You were living my values while I was just talking about them." He stood and extended his hand to Albert. "So, thank you, Albert, not just for your loyalty or your hard work, but for reminding me what leadership really means. You've made me a better businessman, and a better man." When the two of them emerged from the office, the diner once again erupted in applause. Customers were on their feet, clapping, some shouting congratulations, others wiping away tears. Maria was smiling by the counter, her eyes red but filled with pride and relief. Albert was surrounded by his coworkers, who were congratulating him, hugging him, their faces brighter than they had been in weeks. Ricardo raised a hand for quiet. "I have one more announcement," he said to the room. "Effective immediately, Fuentes Diners is instituting a new company-wide policy. All employees will receive a living wage, full benefits, and access to an emergency financial support fund. No one on our team should ever have to choose between paying their rent and helping someone in need." The diner exploded in joyous chaos, cheers, laughter. It felt less like a restaurant and more like a celebration. Amy, the young mother Albert had helped several times, approached him, holding an envelope while her children clung to her side. "We started a collection for you, sir," she said, offering the envelope. "It's not much, just a little something from all of us." Ricardo smiled, a genuine warmth in his voice. "We'll make sure Albert is taken care of, but I have a better idea for that money. Let's use it to start something meaningful. The Albert Johnson Community Fund, a fund for anyone in this town going through a hard time or facing overwhelming medical expenses, because Albert's heart is for his community, and now, this community will give back." Albert looked at the faces gathered in the place where he had served for 7 years. Faces he knew, lives he had touched, with his quiet, powerful kindness, and in their smiles, he felt something he had never sought but deeply deserved: recognition, gratitude, and love. In the weeks that followed, Albert settled into his new home and his new role at the diner. Though he no longer needed to work, he chose to stay not out of necessity, but out of purpose. These were his people, his family. Every morning when Albert Johnson walked into Fuentes Diner, he wasn't the quiet old man in the back anymore. He was a leader, a symbol of compassion, and the heart of a business that had been forever changed by his example. And Ricardo Fuentes kept his promise. He remained a hands-on presence in his business. The changes he made rippled through every branch, creating a new culture where empathy was as valued as efficiency and character counted for more than credentials. As for John and Emily, they faded from memory, becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered in industry circles, not as criminals, but as a warning that cleverness without character leads nowhere, and that the true measure of a person is what they do when they think no one is watching.